This is the story of Formula One's new teams that competed in the Formula One World Championship during the 2010s. Running on limited budgets, the three teams in question rarely got themselves off of the back of the grid to tangle with the more established teams of the time, but nonetheless had their own exciting and challenging battles for the coveted 10th place in the Constructors' Championship. There were virtually no changes to the technical regulations for 2016, aside from the addition of a second wastegate to the car's exhausts in order to increase the volume of the engines. There was, however, a major revision to the qualifying format. Under the original system, the 5 slowest drivers at the end of Q1 and Q2 would be eliminated from qualifying and take their places on the back of the grid, and then the top 10 would then fight for pole position in Q3. Under the new system, starting midway through all 3 sessions, the slowest driver would be eliminated every 90 seconds, as opposed to all drivers setting times until the checkered flag was waved. The hope was that it would force drivers to set consecutive laps instead of one run at the start of the session and another at the end. Marussia entered 2016 utterly unrecognisable for 2015. It was a challenging year where they had barely clung to life, but they entered 2016 with a huge injection of cash and a complete team reshuffle. John Booth and Graham Loudon had left the team, and their positions were taken by the new racing director Dave Ryan. He had had a long career in Formula One, but was fired by McLaren in 2009 for trying to convince Lewis Hamilton to lie to the stewards at the Australian Grand Prix in order to gain a position, a race that Hamilton would be disqualified from. Preparations for 2016 began only 2 days after the end of the 2015 season with a young drivers' test at Yas Marina. Marussia fielded their 2015 development driver Jordan King, giving him his first go in a Formula One car, and GP2 Series driver Rio Haryanto 3 years after he last drove for them at the Young Drivers Test in 2012. On January 18th, they appointed Benetton, Ferrari and McLaren veteran Nicholas Tombassis as chief aerodynamicist. The following day, they announced their new official name as Manor Racing MRT, going back to the name and logo they started out with in 2009, and removing any connection with Virgin or Marussia. A week after this, they also brought on Ferrari veteran Pat Fry as a technical consultant. Under the new management, Will Stevens, Roberto Merri and Alexander Rossi all lost their race seats with the team. Booth and Loudon formed a WEC team called Manor Motorsport, which Stevens and Merri both joined, and Rossi moved on to IndyCar. Test driver Fabio Lima lost his seat too and moved on to Ferrari Challenge Europe. On February 10th, the team announced Mercedes junior driver and 2015 DTM champion Pascal Wehrlein as their first driver. 8 days later, they announced Rio Haryanto as their second driver, becoming Formula One's first ever Indonesian driver. 2 pre-season testing sessions were planned for 2016, both at Catalunya from February 22nd to 25th and March 1st to 4th. On the morning of the first day of the first test, they unveiled their 2016 challenger, the Mercedes-powered MRT-05. It was a complete transformation from the MR03B and looked a lot like the design models of the never-built MNR1, their planned 2015 car. It had a distinctive long, flat duck-billed nose, a Williams gearbox and rear suspension, and another completely new livery of a metallic blue, black, white and orange. They hoped to be more competitive with this car, and one team they had their eyes on was the new Haas F1 team, which increased the grid back to 11 teams and did not guarantee them the much needed prize money for finishing 10th in the Constructors' Championship. Wehrlein went out in the car first and completed 54 laps on the first day. He ran again on day 2 and improved with 71 laps. Haryanto got his first go on day 3 and completed 78 laps, but did trigger a red flag at one point by ending up in the gravel. He did this again on the 4th and final day, but ended up in the barriers, which ended the day early for Manor. At the second test, the team announced Jordan King would be staying on for a second year as development driver. Haryanto completed a modest 45 laps on day 1. Wehrlein completed only 26 laps on day 2, 45 laps on day 3, and then Haryanto did 58 on the final day. A few days later, Rossi was retained as reserve driver for 2016. The team left testing feeling confident as reliability was generally good and Wehrlein's fastest time was only 2 seconds off of the fastest overall. The season began as ever in Melbourne for the Australian Grand Prix. Rain fell before the start of FP1, so Wehrlein completed only 6 laps and Haryanto only 7. The track had dried towards the end of the session, but it rained again before FP2, and Wehrlein and Haryanto now completed the most laps with 24 and 22 respectively, but they were still 4 seconds off of the fastest time. It rained again on Saturday but was dry when FP3 began. Seconds into the session, Haryanto collided with the Haas of Romain Grosjean in the pit lane. Damage to the two cars was minimal. Wehrlein and Haryanto ended up being slowest in the session. Both drivers went out straight away in Q1 to test the new qualifying format. Wehrlein ended up getting eliminated first. He tried to do 2 runs but caught traffic on the second. Haryanto was eliminated 90 seconds later after beating Wehrlein by 15 thousandths of a second. So once again they were starting on the back row, but Haryanto was only 200ths of a second off of the Haas of Esteban Gutierrez in 20th, a considerable improvement from 2015. Haryanto then received a 3-place grid penalty for causing the collision with Grosjean in FP3 and so started behind Wehrlein. The new qualifying format was panned after qualifying had finished, as it created large periods where nobody was on track and drivers were continuously getting caught out and finishing their runs early, even when still in contention. There were calls to immediately revert to the original format, but it was still planned to go ahead in Bahrain. Race day was dry and sunny and both drivers started on super soft tyres. The Red Bull of Daniel Kvyat broke down on the formation lap and failed to start the race, which moved Wehrlein and Haryanto up to 20th and 21st and triggered a second formation lap. Wehrlein had a fantastic start and passed Gutierrez and Grosjean off the line, and then passed the Sauber of Felipe Nasr and the Williams of Valtteri Bottas around the outside of turn 1. The Renault of Kevin Magnussen got a puncture at turn 2 and was passed by both drivers. Wehrlein then passed the Sauber of Marcus Ericsson at turn 6 and attempted a pass on the Renault of Jolyon Palmer at turn 9. Gutierrez started losing power and was passed by Haryanto at turn 13. At the end of lap 1, Wehrlein was 14th and Haryanto 19th. Bottas passed Wehrlein at turn 3 on lap 10. Gutierrez then passed Haryanto at turn 13. Wehrlein pitted for soft tyres on lap 11 and had a slow 5-second stop and came out behind Nasr, who undercut him, and Ericsson, who pitted at the same time. Haryanto pitted on lap 12 for soft tyres and came out 12 seconds behind Wehrlein. Gutierrez and Fernando Alonso collided at turn 3 on lap 17, which sent Alonso airborne and brought out the safety car. 1 lap later the race was red flagged. After the cars lined up in the pit lane, the mechanics discovered a terminal issue with the drive shaft on Haryanto's car, which put him out of the race. The race resumed 20 minutes later behind the safety car, with Wehrlein now in 17th on a new set of soft tyres. The safety car came in at the end of lap 19. Magnussen had unlapped himself during the red flag and passed Wehrlein at turn 13 on lap 21, leaving him last, as Grosjean had not pitted before the red flag and was now in 9th. Kimi Raikkonen retired on lap 22, which moved Wehrlein back up to 17th. Nasr got passed by Magnussen and Wehrlein on lap 25. Ericsson took a drive-through penalty on lap 27, which moved Wehrlein up to 15th. Wehrlein made his final stop on lap 32 for medium tyres and came back out in 17th. He first got lapped on lap 38. Ericsson retired on lap 39, which moved Wehrlein up to 16th. Wehrlein then struggled with brakes and tyre degradation and finished 1 minute and 20 seconds behind Nasr, but still set the 12th fastest lap of the race. Grosjean finished 6th for Haas, which quickly eliminated any chance of beating them in the Constructors' Championship. Next up was the lights of the Bahrain Grand Prix. The team's second attempt at the controversial knockout-style qualifying went much better. Haryanto got only 1 run in and was eliminated second by beating Felipe Nasr by 0.2 to line up 21st. Wehrlein was 1.4 seconds faster and was the last driver eliminated in Q1 to line up a stunning 16th, ahead of Marcus Ericsson, Sergio Perez, Kevin Magnussen and Jolyon Palmer. A pit lane start for Magnussen moved Haryanto up to 20th. Both drivers started on soft tyres. Sebastian Vettel and Palmer both broke down on the formation lap, moving Wehrlein and Haryanto up to 15th and 18th. Wehrlein had a slightly slow start and was passed by Perez off the line. Haryanto's start was better and he passed Ericsson off the line, but was repassed around the outside of turn 1. Wehrlein managed to pass a rookie Stoffel Vandoorne at turn 2 and Daniel Kvyat at turn 3, but was repassed by Vandoorne at turn 4. Nasr passed Haryanto at turn 4 but ran wide at turn 5 and rejoined behind him. Wehrlein went slightly wide at turn 9 and was almost passed by Kvyat, and Haryanto attempted a pass on Ericsson at turn 10. Nico Hülkenberg pitted at the end of lap 1, which left Wehrlein 14th and Haryanto 17th. Nasr passed Haryanto again at turn 1 on lap 2. Carlos Sainz received a puncture from Perez at turn 2 and was passed by all drivers and crawled round to the pits for new tyres. Magnussen passed Haryanto as well at turn 4. and Kvyat repassed Wehrlein at turn 11. Perez pitted as well at the end of lap 2 for a new front wing, which left Wehrlein 13th and Haryanto still in 17th. Jenson Button pulled over on lap 7 and Esteban Gutierrez pulled into the pits to retire on lap 10, which moved them up 2 places. Wehrlein first pitted on lap 11 and Haryanto on lap 12, both for a second set of soft tyres. Wehrlein was undercut by Nasser and Ericsson passed Wehrlein at turn 1 on lap 16. Kvyat pitted on lap 16 and came up behind Wehrlein but passed him at turn 9 on lap 19. Perez passed Haryanto at turn 1 on lap 22 and Wehrlein there on lap 27. Hulkenberg passed Haryanto at turn 1 on lap 29. Wehrlein then did his second stop for super soft tyres and came up behind Magnussen, who had pitted on lap 24. However, he managed to successfully undercut Nasser, who pitted a lap later. Sainz then retired, which left Haryanto last on track. Haryanto did his second stop on lap 31 for medium tyres and came out lapped. Wehrlein repassed Perez on fresher tyres on the run to turn 1 on lap 36. He was then lapped soon after. Perez pitted on lap 37 and came up behind Haryanto and passed him at turn 1 on lap 40. Wehrlein managed to pull away from Nasser and closed right up to Ericsson on his shorter third stint and pitted for a final time for super soft tyres on lap 41. He came up behind Perez, Nasser and Hulkenberg and passed Perez again at turn 1 on lap 43. Haryanto did his final stop also for super soft tyres on lap 44. Wehrlein passed Nasser again at turn 1 on lap 47. Nasser then pitted. He then chased down Hulkenberg as well and passed him at turn 1 on lap 51 before Hulkenberg pitted for a final time. He then closed up to Ericsson and attempted to pass around the outside of turn 1 on lap 54, but the tyres went off the cliff and he finished 2.5 seconds behind in 13th. Haryanto finished 19 seconds behind Perez in 17th and last. Despite not being in contention for points, this was by far the most competitive race in the team's history, and their pace was utterly unrecognisable from 2015. Next up was the Chinese Grand Prix. FP1 was disrupted by 2 red flags and rain came before FP3, which limited running. For this race, the knockout style qualifying was finally scrapped and the 2015 format reinstated. Despite the track still being damp, Wehrlein went out on soft tyres but hit a bump on the start-finish straight and crashed at the start of his first run, bringing out the red flags. He was joined on the back row for the race by Lewis Hamilton, who also failed to set a time. Haryanto did set a time when the session resumed but qualified 20th, 3/4 of a second behind Julian Palmer in 19th. Both drivers started on soft tyres. Hamilton quickly passed both of them off the line. Wehrlein had the better start of the two and got past Haryanto. Wehrlein then passed Palmer and repassed Hamilton at turn 1. Hamilton, Felipe Nasser, Kimi Raikkonen and Romain Grosjean all lost their front wings at turn 2 and were passed by both drivers. Wehrlein then passed Gutierrez as well at turn 3. At the end of lap 1, Wehrlein was 15th and Haryanto 18th. Daniel Ricciardo suffered a tyre blowout on the back straight on lap 3 and pitted, which gave a place to both drivers. The safety car was brought out on lap 4 to clear the debris. Numerous drivers pitted, which moved Wehrlein up to 4th and Haryanto to 8th. The race resumed at the end of lap 8. Haryanto was immediately passed by Sergio Perez and Valtteri Bottas at turn 1, Jenson Button at turn 3 and Carlos Sainz at turn 4. Daniel Kvyat passed Wehrlein at turn 6 and Nico Hulkenberg passed Haryanto there. Sebastian Vettel passed Haryanto at turn 7, so at the end of lap 9 Wehrlein was 5th and Haryanto 14th. Ricciardo passed Haryanto at turn 2 on lap 10 and Hamilton passed him at turn 6 on lap 11, Palmer at turn 9, Raikkonen at turn 11 and Verstappen at turn 14. This train then came out of Wehrlein. He was passed by Perez at turn 1 on lap 12 and Vettel at turn 6. Palmer passed Haryanto at turn 9. Bottas then passed Wehrlein at turn 14. Marcus Ericsson passed Haryanto at turn 2 on lap 13 and Kevin Magnussen passed him at turn 6. Button passed Wehrlein at turn 14 and then Sainz passed him at turn 1 on lap 14. Ricciardo passed him at turn 9 and Hamilton at turn 14. Hulkenberg passed him at turn 1 on lap 15. Wehrlein then pitted for a second set of soft tyres and came out in front of Palmer in 21st. Haryanto then got passed by Grosjean at turn 1. Haryanto pitted for a second set of soft tyres on lap 18 and came out 22nd and last. Magnussen, Grosjean and Nasser all pitted on lap 20 and came out behind Haryanto, and Gutierrez pitted and came out behind Wehrlein, leaving Wehrlein 16th and Haryanto 19th. Gutierrez passed Wehrlein at turn 14 on lap 21. Palmer pitted on lap 24, which gave a place to Haryanto. Wehrlein did his second stop on lap 27 for a third set of soft tyres and came out 21st. Haryanto pitted the following lap also for a third set of soft tyres and came out 22nd and lapped. Wehrlein passed Nasser at turn 14 on lap 32 on fresher tyres. Grosjean pitted on lap 33, which gave a place to both drivers. Haryanto passed Palmer at turn 14 on lap 36. Magnussen pitted on lap 36 and also came up behind both drivers. Grosjean repassed Haryanto at turn 13 on lap 38. Haryanto did his final pit stop on lap 40 for medium tyres and came out 21st. Wehrlein did his final stop on lap 43 for super soft tyres and came out 20th behind Nasser and also lapped. Grosjean pitted the following lap, which moved him up to 19th. He then passed Nasser again at turn 6 on lap 46 and finished the race in 18th, 5 seconds behind Magnussen. Haryanto was 30 seconds behind in 21st and 2 seconds ahead of Palmer. This was the first race since the European Grand Prix in 2011 with no retirements, and broke the record for most overtakes in a race with 161. Next up was the Russian Grand Prix, which had been moved from its usual October slot to May. Haryanto had limited running in FP1 while the team fixed his car's steering rack, and then Wehrlein came to a stop at turn 14 as the checkered flag came out in FP2. Wehrlein qualified in 20th, just under 0.4 of a second behind Felipe Nasr in 19th. Haryanto was less than 0.007 of a second slower in 21st, beating Marcus Ericsson by only 0.006 of a second. Both drivers started on super soft tyres. Wehrlein had a slightly slow start and got passed by Haryanto at turn 1 and Ericsson on the approach to turn 2. When braking for turn 2, Esteban Gutierrez hit Nico Hülkenberg and put him into a spin which sandwiched Haryanto between him and Ericsson and briefly launched Haryanto into the air, putting him and Hülkenberg out of the race. Wehrlein exited turn 3 in 17th in front of Ericsson. Daniel Kvyat sent Sebastian Vettel into the wall and out of the race through turn 4. Sergio Perez got a puncture from Daniel Ricciardo at turn 2 and was passed by Wehrlein at turn 5. The virtual safety car then came out. Within half a lap, this then became a full safety car. Kvyat, Ricciardo, Ericsson, Perez and Gutierrez all pitted at the end of lap 1, leaving Wehrlein 14th. The race resumed at the end of lap 3. Wehrlein initially kept within DRS range of Jenson Button and Felipe Nasr in front, but was passed by Perez at turn 2 on lap 9. Wehrlein then passed Nasr at turn 2 on lap 10. Nasr tried to come back at him at turn 3 but got pushed off track by Wehrlein after he slid onto the sausage curb. Wehrlein pitted for soft tyres on lap 13 and came up behind Ricciardo and Nasr, who would undercut him. This left just Kvyat and Gutierrez behind, who would both serve penalties for causing the first lap collisions. Wehrlein closed back to Nasr and Kvyat closed in from behind. He attempted a pass on Nasr at turn 2 on lap 27 but caught the sausage curb which forced Nasr to cut turn 3. He tried again at turn 14 on lap 28 but locked up. This allowed Kvyat to close right up. Wehrlein then slid at turn 16 which allowed Kvyat through. Wehrlein got lapped on lap 31. Max Verstappen retired on lap 34 which moved Wehrlein up to 17th. He did his final pit stop on lap 39 for a second set of super soft tyres, but a problem with the left rear tyre cost him 20 seconds and he came out far behind Gutierrez. He was lapped for a second time on lap 41 and finished in 18th and last. Manor brought their first major upgrade to the Spanish Grand Prix with a new floor, bodywork, front and rear wings. This was a track the team had historically had poor pace at, and they qualified on the back row once again. However, Wehrlein was less than 0.2 of a second behind Felipe Nasr in 20th, with Haryanto another 0.2 slower in 22nd. The drivers split strategies with Wehrlein starting on softs and Haryanto on mediums. The two drivers maintained position off the line. Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg took each other out of the race at turn 4 which moved them up to 19th and 20th, and Wehrlein then passed Felipe Massa there. The safety car was immediately brought out. The race resumed at the end of lap 3. Massa repassed Wehrlein at turn 7. Wehrlein first pitted on lap 11 for medium tyres. Haryanto was briefly up to 10th on lap 12 but got passed by Jenson Button at turn 1 on lap 14, Fernando Alonso at turn 3 and Massa at turn 10. Nico Hülkenberg passed him at turn 1 on lap 15 and Magnussen at turn 10. Daniel Kvyat passed him at turn 7 on lap 16 and Marcus Ericsson at turn 1 on lap 17. Julian Palmer and Esteban Gutierrez then passed him at turn 4. Nasr then passed him at turn 10 and Wehrlein was now only 2 seconds behind despite having already pitted. Wehrlein passed him at turn 1 on lap 20. Hulkenberg retired on lap 21, which moved both of them up a place. Haryanto pitted for a second set of medium tyres on lap 22 and came out 30 seconds behind Wehrlein. He was then lapped on lap 25. Wehrlein did his second and final stop on lap 33 for a second set of medium tyres and came out also lapped and just in front of Haryanto. Romain Grosjean pitted on lap 37 and came up behind both drivers. He passed Haryanto at turn 10 on lap 39 and Wehrlein at turn 1 on lap 43. Alonso retired on lap 46, which moved them both up a place. Haryanto did his final stop on lap 48 for soft tyres and came out 45 seconds behind Wehrlein, but started closing in rapidly on his fresher tyres. Grosjean retired on lap 57, which moved them both up another place, and they finished 15 seconds apart in 16th and 17th. A few days after the race, a 2-day in-season test was held at Catalonia. Wehrlein ran on the first day and Jordan King on the second. It was now time for the Monaco Grand Prix. Both drivers got themselves onto the penultimate row of the grid as Felipe Nasr's engine went up in smoke on his in-lap and Max Verstappen crashed halfway through Q1. Haryanto beat Wehrlein for the first time since Australia by 0.2 of a second, but was 0.7 of a second slower than Jolyon Palmer in 18th. Heavy rain fell before the start of the race, which forced it to be started behind the safety car with everyone on full wet tyres. Daniel Kvyat pitted at the end of lap 1 for a new steering wheel and came back out lapped, which moved Haryanto and Wehrlein up to 18th and 19th. The safety car came in at the end of lap 7 and the race finally got underway. Kevin Magnussen immediately pitted for intermediate tyres, which gave both drivers a place. At the same time, teammate Palmer crashed out on the run to Sainte Devote right in front of Haryanto, which brought out the virtual safety car. Verstappen managed to pass Wehrlein on the run to Sainte Devote just before it was called. Nasr behind and Jenson Button in front pitted for intermediates on lap 8, moving Haryanto and Wehrlein to 15th and 17th. The virtual safety car ended on lap 10 while both drivers were going through Mirabeau Haute. Verstappen passed Haryanto at the Lowe's hairpin. The sun had now come out and the track was starting to dry. Kimi Raikkonen crashed out at the Lowe's hairpin on lap 11 and blocked Romain Grosjean in against the barriers at Mirabeau Basse, who managed to carry on, which moved Haryanto and Wehrlein up to 14th and 15th. Haryanto pitted at the end of lap 11 for intermediate tyres along with Marcus Ericsson and came out 19th, moving Wehrlein up to 13th. Verstappen pitted for intermediates on lap 12, which moved Wehrlein to 12th. Valtteri Bottas pitted for intermediates on lap 15, which moved Wehrlein up to 11th. Grosjean pitted for intermediates on lap 16 and came up behind Haryanto. Button passed Wehrlein at the Nouvelle Chicane on lap 17. Bottas passed him at the same place on lap 19, and soon after Verstappen passed him at Tabac. Bottas let Wehrlein back through at Sainte Devote on lap 20 as he had partially cut the chicane when passing him. Daniel Kvyat attempted to unlap Magnussen at Tabac and pushed both of them into the wall, which put him out of the race and allowed Haryanto to pass Magnussen. Grosjean passed Haryanto at the Nouvelle Chicane on lap 25, leaving just Magnussen behind him by over a minute. Ericsson pitted for dry tyres on lap 29, which gave a place to Haryanto. Haryanto was then lapped on lap 30. Wehrlein joined Lewis Hamilton as the only drivers to skip the intermediate tyre entirely when he pitted for ultra-soft tyres on lap 31. However, he had lost 35 seconds to the rest of the field and created a 5-car train behind. He came up behind Bottas in 15th, with Haryanto briefly getting up to 13th. Magnussen crashed out on lap 33. Wehrlein was lapped on lap 34. Verstappen crashed out at Massenet on lap 35, which triggered a virtual safety car. Haryanto then made his stop for ultra-soft tyres and came out in front of Wehrlein in 13th, and had managed to unlap himself. The virtual safety car ended on lap 37 and Haryanto was immediately re-lapped. Wehrlein passed Haryanto at Portier and Grosjean passed Haryanto at the Nouvelle Chicane. Nasr then passed Haryanto at Sainte Devote and then Ericsson passed him at the Nouvelle Chicane, leaving him running last in 17th. He lost a huge amount of ground with blue flags and poor tyre temperatures and was lapped for a second time on lap 42. Sauber teammates Ericsson and Nasr took each other out of the race at Rascasse on lap 48 while struggling along with Grosjean to get past Wehrlein, which moved Haryanto up to 15th and brought out the virtual safety car. Haryanto pitted again onto the virtual safety car for a second set of ultra-soft tyres and was lapped for a third time. Wehrlein was lapped for a second time on lap 54. The virtual safety car came out again briefly on lap 68 after a large plastic sheet fell onto the start-finish straight. Haryanto was lapped for a fourth time on lap 73. Wehrlein kept Grosjean behind for over 40 laps to finish in 13th after a 45-lap stint on ultra-soft tyres. However, post-race he was given two 10-second time penalties for ignoring blue flags and speeding under the virtual safety car, moving him down to 14th. Haryanto had a poor race to finish 2 laps behind in 15th. Formula 1 then flew over to the Atlantic for the Canadian Grand Prix. Wehrlein came very close to advancing to Q2 for the first time as he went 14th of his first run before rain started to fall. However, the rain was not intense enough for intermediate tyres and other drivers set faster laps, moving him down to 18th. Haryanto caught the curb at turn 4 in his second run and smacked both rear wheels against the barriers and qualified 21st after Kevin Magnussen failed to set a time following a crash in FP3. Grid penalties for Carlos Sainz and Marcus Ericsson moved Wehrlein to 17th and Haryanto to 19th, split by Felipe Nasr. Wehrlein started on ultra-soft tyres and Haryanto on the super softs. Wehrlein picked up floor damage on the way to the grid which hampered his pace throughout the entire race. Both had good getaways and Haryanto almost passed Nasr but got squeezed out by him and Sainz. Wehrlein passed Jolyon Palmer at turn 2 but Haryanto was passed there by Ericsson and Magnussen. Magnussen sent Nasr into a spin at turn 4 which allowed Haryanto to pass him. Sainz then passed Wehrlein around the outside of the Le Pont hairpin. Haryanto passed Magnussen at turn 2 on lap 7 after Magnussen went across the grass at turn 1. Jenson Button pulled over on the back straight on lap 10 which triggered a virtual safety car. The race resumed at the very end of lap 11. Wehrlein made his first stop for soft tyres and Haryanto passed Ericsson at turn 12. Ericsson pitted on lap 14 and came out 5 seconds behind Wehrlein. Haryanto pitted on lap 15 for soft tyres and came out just behind Nasr after a 7.5 second stop. Palmer retired on lap 17 which moved Wehrlein and Haryanto to 17th and 20th. Haryanto then got lapped. Wehrlein got lapped on lap 30. Wehrlein closed up to Magnussen in the second stint but Ericsson also closed up to him and passed both drivers on the back straight on lap 33. Felipe Massa retired on lap 36 which moved Wehrlein and Haryanto up a place. Nasr then pitted and came out 17 seconds behind Haryanto. Wehrlein did his final stop for a second set of soft tyres on lap 38. Magnussen pitted a lap later and came out in front. Haryanto did his final stop also for a second set of soft tyres on lap 44 and came out back behind Nasr and was lapped for a second time. Wehrlein was lapped for a second time on lap 58 and finished the race in 17th, 8 seconds behind Magnussen. Haryanto finished in 19th and last, 32 seconds behind Nasr. The next round saw the return of the European Grand Prix after a 4-year absence, this time being held at the brand new Baku City Circuit in Azerbaijan. Both drivers enjoyed their strongest qualifying of the year as they almost advanced to Q2. Haryanto qualified 17th and missed out on Q2 by only a tenth of a second. Wehrlein's second run was ruined by yellow flags and he was another tenth slower in 18th. A grid penalty for Carlos Sainz moved them up to 16th and 17th. Haryanto started on super soft tyres and Wehrlein on softs. Wehrlein had a poor start and was passed by Jenson Button, Jolyon Palmer and Sainz off the line. Haryanto had a better start, but was squeezed in against the wall at turn 1 by a heavily locking up Esteban Gutierrez which damaged his front wing. Palmer and Sainz ran wide at turn 1 which allowed Wehrlein back past them. Wehrlein then passed Haryanto at turn 2. Palmer passed Haryanto at turn 4. Wehrlein passed Gutierrez at turn 7. Haryanto pitted at the end of lap 1 for a new front wing and a set of soft tyres and came out 32 seconds behind Kevin Magnussen. Sainz pitted on lap 4 which gave a place to Wehrlein. Max Verstappen, Fernando Alonso and Daniel Kvyat pitted on lap 5 which gave him 3 more places. Daniel Ricciardo and Button pitted on lap 6 which gave 2 more places to Wehrlein and Kvyat retired which gave a place to Haryanto. Felipe Massa and Felipe Nasr pitted on lap 7 which moved Wehrlein to 9th. Kimi Raikkonen then pitted on lap 8 which moved him up to a peak of 8th. Gutierrez also pitted and came out 10 seconds behind Haryanto. Ricciardo passed Wehrlein at turn 1 on lap 10. Grosjean pitted right in front of Wehrlein at the end of lap 10 and Raikkonen then passed Wehrlein at turn 2 on lap 11. Massa passed Wehrlein on the start-finish straight at the end of lap 11. Verstappen did the same to him on lap 14 and he was now out of the points. Sainz then passed Wehrlein at turn 1 on lap 16. Gutierrez caught and passed Haryanto at the same place. Alonso passed Wehrlein at turn 1 on lap 17 and Button passed him there on lap 18 and Nasr there on lap 19. Verstappen pitted again on lap 20 which gave a place to Wehrlein, however Grosjean then passed Wehrlein at turn 1 on lap 22. Alonso and Nasr pitted again on lap 24 which gave 2 places to Wehrlein. Button and Ericsson pitted again on lap 25, which gave places to Wehrlein and Haryanto. Grosjean pitted on lap 26, but Magnussen passed Wehrlein at the same time. Ericsson passed Haryanto at turn 1 on lap 27. Sainz pitted on lap 27, but Verstappen then passed Wehrlein at the same time. Haryanto was first lapped on lap 29. Wehrlein finally pitted on lap 29 for medium tyres after doing by far the longest first stint in the race and came out in 18th, 18 seconds behind Grosjean and just in front of Ericsson. Ericsson tried to pass Wehrlein at turn 6 but was forced off the track. Both drivers were then lapped soon after. Ericsson and Gutierrez passed Wehrlein at turn 1 on lap 31, leaving him and Haryanto as the final two in the race. Sainz retired on lap 32, which moved them both to 19th and 20th. Wehrlein began to lose the brakes and pulled over in the runoff area at turn 1 and out of the race on lap 40. Alonso retired on lap 43, which moved Haryanto up to 18th. He was lapped for a second time on lap 48 and finished a disappointing race for the team in last place. It was now time for the Austrian Grand Prix. Both drivers received reprimands after FP1 as Haryanto span at turn 8 and rejoined the track right in front of Daniel Ricciardo, and Wehrlein failed to slow sufficiently during a virtual safety car period. Rain interfered with running in FP2. The team felt confident going into qualifying as Wehrlein went 13th fastest in FP3. Wehrlein's pace proved to be genuine as he went 10th fastest in Q1, advancing to Q2 for the first time. Haryanto was less than half a second slower, but it was only enough for 19th, but he still outqualified Daniel Kvyat and both Saubers of Marcus Ericsson and Felipe Nasr. He then received a 3-place grid penalty for failing to slow for yellow flags, but only moved behind Ericsson as Nasr also had a penalty and Kvyat started the race from the pit lane. Wehrlein was slightly slower in Q2, but still qualified 12th, by far the team's best ever qualifying result in dry conditions. On race day, Felipe Massa started from the pit lane, which moved Wehrlein to 11th and Haryanto to 19th. Wehrlein started on ultra soft tyres and Haryanto on softs. At the end of the formation lap, Wehrlein lined up in Massa's vacant grid slot by mistake. He reversed back into his and stopped the car a mere half a second before the light sequence began, preventing him from getting a penalty. Esteban Gutierrez had a very slow start when the lights went out and was passed by Wehrlein, who in turn was passed by Romain Grosjean around the outside of the Niki Lauda curve. Haryanto was passed there by Nasr. Grosjean locked up at Remus, which allowed Wehrlein back past him. However, Grosjean tried to take the place back at Schlossgold, which allowed Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez to pass Wehrlein there. At the end of lap 1, Wehrlein was 12th and Haryanto 20th. Massa passed Haryanto at Remus on lap 2. Kvyat retired from behind Haryanto on lap 3, leaving him last on track. Fernando Alonso and Nico Hülkenberg pitted on lap 8, which moved Wehrlein up to 11th and Haryanto up to 19th. Jenson Button, Valtteri Bottas, Sainz and Perez pitted on lap 9, which moved Wehrlein to 7th and Haryanto to 15th. Nico Rosberg then pitted on lap 10, which moved Wehrlein to 6th and Haryanto to 14th. Rosberg swiftly passed Haryanto at Rindt. Kevin Magnussen then pitted on lap 11, which moved him back to 14th. Jolyon Palmer, Massa and Ericsson all pitted on lap 12, which moved Haryanto to 11th. Button passed Haryanto at Remus on lap 13. Wehrlein made his first stop on lap 13 for a second set of ultra-soft tyres and came out 17th, just in front of Magnussen. Hülkenberg passed Haryanto at Rindt on lap 13, and Bottas passed him at the Niki Lauda curve on lap 14. Alonso passed Haryanto at Remus on lap 16. Perez then passed him at the Niki Lauda curve on lap 17. Sainz passed Haryanto at Remus on lap 18, and he now had Wehrlein only 2.5 seconds behind. Magnussen passed Wehrlein at the Niki Lauda curve on lap 21. Wehrlein attempted to take the place back on the run to Remus, but was blocked several times by Magnussen. Gutierrez pitted on lap 21, which moved Haryanto to 15th and Wehrlein back to 17th. Palmer then passed Wehrlein as well. Wehrlein made his second stop on lap 23 for a set of soft tyres and came out 21st and last and lapped. Hülkenberg pitted again on lap 24, which moved Haryanto up to 14th. Sebastian Vettel crashed out on the start-finish straight on lap 27 just in front of Wehrlein, which moved him and Haryanto up a place and brought out the safety car. Haryanto pitted for super soft tyres and came out 19th, and Wehrlein was permitted to unlap himself. The race resumed at the end of lap 41 with Wehrlein 8 seconds behind Haryanto. Wehrlein closed up to within DRS range of Haryanto on lap 41, who himself had stayed within DRS range of Ericsson. Gutierrez pitted on lap 41, which moved both drivers up to 18th and 19th. Nasser pitted on lap 43, which gave them both another place, and Wehrlein then passed Haryanto at the Niki Lauda curve. Magnussen pitted on lap 49, which moved them up another place. Haryanto pitted on lap 50 for a second set of super soft tyres alongside Hülkenberg, Palmer and Ericsson, which moved him down to 20th and lapped, but moved Wehrlein up to 13th. Bottas pitted on lap 51, which moved him to 12th. Bottas repassed Wehrlein at the Niki Lauda curve on lap 56. Massa then pitted, which moved Wehrlein back up to 12th. Massa retired on lap 64, which moved Haryanto up to 19th. Wehrlein passed Alonso on lap 64, who then retired as well, which moved him to 11th and Haryanto to 18th. Hülkenberg then pitted to also retire, which moved Haryanto to 17th. Wehrlein was still within DRS range of Bottas and his first championship point. Wehrlein got lapped on lap 68. On the final lap, Hamilton and Rosberg collided at Remus while fighting for the lead, which broke Rosberg's front wing off. Bottas and Wehrlein passed him at Schlossgold, and Gutierrez passed him on the other side and came very close to passing Wehrlein. However, just before this happened, Perez speared off into the barriers at Schlossgold, which meant Wehrlein crossed the line in 10th and Haryanto in 16th. For only the second time in their history, Manor had finished within the points. It propelled Wehrlein from 22nd to 17th in the Drivers' Championship, and as with the 2014 Monaco Grand Prix, it put the team ahead of Sauber in the Constructors' Championship. After the high of Austria, it was time for the team's home race, the British Grand Prix. Their pace in Austria did not translate well to the high-speed Silverstone, as both drivers were knocked out in Q1. Haryanto qualified 19th and Wehrlein 20th, only beating Felipe Nasr as Marcus Ericsson crashed in FP3 and did not set a time. Race day was bright and sunny, but a huge downpour came 20 minutes before the race start. The race therefore began behind the safety car with everyone on full wet tyres. The race got underway at the end of lap 5. More than half the grid immediately pitted for intermediate tyres, including Wehrlein, which moved him down to 21st and jumped Esteban Gutierrez, who was double stacked behind Romain Grosjean. Haryanto jumped up to 10th before pitting on lap 6 for intermediates and coming out 20th. As he exited the pits, Wehrlein caught the standing water at Abbey and slid off into the gravel trap and out of the race, which triggered a virtual safety car. The race resumed on lap 8. Haryanto span at Vale on lap 9, which allowed Gutierrez through. Ericsson pitted at the same time and came out just behind the recovering Haryanto. Ericsson then pitted to retire on lap 10, leaving Haryanto last on track. The sun was out and the track was rapidly drying. Jolyon Palmer pitted on lap 16 and left his box on 3 wheels and came out behind Haryanto. Haryanto pitted for medium tyres on lap 17 and came out just behind Palmer. Grosjean then pulled over at Copse on lap 18, which moved Haryanto up to 19th. Haryanto got lapped on lap 19. Palmer then pitted to serve a 10-second stop-go penalty, which moved Haryanto to 18th, 30 seconds behind Gutierrez. On lap 25, Haryanto also caught a wet patch at Abbey and slid off sideways across the gravel trap and into the barriers, so Manor had quickly gone from their best result of the year to their worst. A few days after the race, a young drivers' test was held at Silverstone. Manor ran Haryanto and reserve driver Jordan King, and Wehrlein drove the championship-winning Mercedes W05 as part of his development programme with the team. Next was the Hungarian Grand Prix. Wehrlein had power unit problems in FP1 and had it replaced before FP2. A huge, unexpected downpour midday on Saturday delayed qualifying by 20 minutes. It was soon stopped after getting underway due to poor visibility. When it got underway again, Wehrlein and Haryanto set unrepresentative times 3 seconds apart from each other before a crash from Marcus Ericsson triggered another red flag. Q1 resumed for a second time again but was quickly red flagged again due to a crash from Felipe Massa. Q1 resumed for a third time with everyone switching to intermediates. Wehrlein was on course for a lap time that would have comfortably qualified him for Q2, however Haryanto then crashed at turn 10 and the red flag was called for the 4th time less than a second before Wehrlein crossed the finish line. The two drivers qualified 21st and 22nd, with times well outside the 107% time, but due to the exceptional circumstances they were still permitted to race. On race day, Ericsson started from the pit lane which moved them up to 20th and 21st. Wehrlein started on super soft tyres and Haryanto on softs. Wehrlein had another good start and passed Kevin Magnussen off the line and then passed Daniel Kvyat, Felipe Massa and Jolyon Palmer at turn 1, but Palmer took the place back at turn 2. Jenson Button experienced a loss of power on lap 5 and was passed by both drivers. Wehrlein made his first stop on lap 9 for soft tyres and came out in 21st, 14 seconds behind Ericsson and 4 seconds in front of Button. Button served a drive-through penalty on lap 10 which gave Wehrlein breathing space. Felipe Nasr pitted on lap 11 and came out in between Ericsson and Wehrlein. Romain Grosjean pitted on lap 14 and came out just behind Haryanto, who was immediately past him at turn 1. Ericsson pitted on lap 17 which moved Wehrlein up to 20th. Nasr passed Haryanto at turn 1 on lap 23 and he now had Wehrlein right behind him. Kvyat pitted on lap 24 and Massa on lap 25 which gave both drivers 2 places. Kvyat passed Wehrlein at turn 1 on lap 28. Haryanto made his sole pit stop on lap 29 for medium tyres and came out 22nd and lapped. Wehrlein was lapped on lap 33. He made his second stop for a second set of soft tyres on lap 35 with Ericsson and Massa right behind him and came out in 22nd, 5 seconds behind Haryanto. He passed Haryanto at turn 1 on lap 41. Ericsson pitted on lap 45 and came out in between both drivers. Haryanto was lapped for a second time on lap 54. Button retired on lap 61 which gave both drivers a place. Wehrlein was lapped for a second time on lap 62 and they finished the race in 19th and 21st. The final race before the summer break was the German Grand Prix, returning after being absent from the 2015 calendar. Haryanto's seat looked in doubt going into the weekend as money from his main sponsors Pertamina dried out faster than expected. McLaren reserve driver Stoffel van Dorn was briefly a contender to take his seat, but Haryanto was able to secure the required funds for the weekend. Wehrlein qualified in 18th for his home race after initially going 13th on his first run. Haryanto was a quarter of a second slower in 20th, beating both Saubers, with Daniel Kvyat splitting the 2 drivers. A grid penalty for Romain Grosjean moved both drivers up a place. Both drivers started on super soft tyres. Wehrlein was passed by Kvyat off the line and Haryanto by Grosjean and Ericsson. Nasr repassed Ericsson and Grosjean at the Nord curve, but Nasr came through and passed him and Wehrlein. Haryanto was then repassed by Grosjean and Ericsson at the hairpin. Wehrlein was passed by Grosjean at the hairpin on lap 2, and Haryanto repassed Ericsson there. Jolyon Palmer pitted at the end of lap 2 which moved them up to 19th and 20th. Haryanto attempted to pass on Wehrlein at the hairpin on lap 3 but ended up losing a front wing end plate. Ericsson then passed Haryanto at the Nord curve on lap 5. Nasr and Kvyat both pitted on lap 7 which moved Wehrlein and Haryanto up 2 places. Sergio Perez pitted on lap 8, Carlos Sainz and Felipe Massa on lap 9 and Kevin Magnussen on lap 11 which moved Wehrlein to 13th and Haryanto to 15th. Perez passed Haryanto at the Nord curve on lap 12. Wehrlein pitted for a second set of super soft tyres on lap 12 and came out 21st in front of Nasr. Haryanto was passed by Massa at the Nord curve on lap 13 and then Magnussen and Sainz at the hairpin. He then pitted for soft tyres but had a 13-second stop and came out 22nd, 15 seconds behind Nasr. Wehrlein then passed Palmer at the Nord curve. Ericsson pitted on lap 16 and came out 9 seconds in front of Haryanto. Nasr pitted on lap 19 and came out 9 seconds behind Haryanto. Haryanto was first lapped on lap 22. Palmer pitted on lap 25 which moved Haryanto up a place. Wehrlein made his second stop on lap 26 for soft tyres and came out 11 seconds behind Ericsson and lapped. Felipe Massa pitted at the same time but had a slow stop and came up behind him and Haryanto. Massa passed Haryanto at the hairpin on lap 28. Nasr passed Haryanto at the hairpin on lap 32. Haryanto made his second stop on lap 33 for a second set of super soft tyres and came out 22nd, 18 seconds behind Palmer. Ericsson pitted on lap 34 which moved Wehrlein up a place. Massa retired on lap 36 which moved Haryanto up to 21st. Nasr pitted on lap 42 and Palmer on lap 45 which gave Haryanto 2 places. Wehrlein made his final stop on lap 46 for a second set of soft tyres and came out 10 seconds behind Ericsson. Haryanto made his final stop on lap 49 for a third set of super soft tyres and came out 17 seconds behind Nasr and lapped for a second time. Wehrlein quartered past Ericsson on much fresher tyres at the hairpin on lap 54. Nasr retired on lap 57 which moved Haryanto up a place. Wehrlein was lapped for a second time on lap 64 and finished the race in 17th, with Haryanto 50 seconds behind in 20th and last. A driver change came at the Belgian Grand Prix. Haryanto's sponsorship money had finally run out and he was demoted to a reserve driver role. Reserve driver and recent Indy 500 winner Alexander Rossi was offered the seat, but turned it down in order to focus on his IndyCar career. Development driver Jordan King was ineligible for the seat as he did not possess an FAA super license. Instead, Pascal Wehrlein was joined by another Mercedes junior driver, the reigning GP3 Series champion and Renault reserve driver Esteban Ocon. Ocon ended his first practice session for Manor over a second faster than Wehrlein. Wehrlein was sent onto the grass by a weaving Esteban Gutierrez in FP3. Wehrlein put in a stunning performance in qualifying to go 9th fastest in Q1. Ocon was only half a second slower but qualified 18th on his qualifying debut. Wehrlein had to abort his first run in Q2 due to a loose wheel and then did a second run on used tyres to qualify a disappointing 16th. A grid penalty for Gutierrez for his scuffle with Wehrlein in FP3 moved both drivers up a place. Both drivers started on soft tyres. Felipe Nasr passed Wehrlein off the line and then both drivers were passed by Gutierrez and Daniel Kvyat on the run to La Source. Sebastian Vettel was sent into a spin at La Source and Kvyat went wide and they were passed by both drivers. Both drivers then repassed Gutierrez on the run to Eau Rouge. Kimi Raikkonen then got a puncture on the Kemmel straight and was passed by both drivers. Wehrlein rear-ended Jenson Button at Lecumbe, which put both of them out of the race. Ocon was passed by Gutierrez at Campus, then passed Nasr at Blanchimont and was passed by Alonso at the bus stop chicane. Max Verstappen pitted for repairs, which left Ocon 13th at the end of lap 1. Carlos Sainz suffered a tyre blowout on the Kemmel straight on lap 2 and was passed by Ocon at Lecumbe. The virtual safety car was brought out at the end of lap 2. Felipe Massa pitted, which moved Ocon up to 11th. The race resumed at the end of lap 3. Ocon was immediately passed by Lewis Hamilton at the bus stop chicane. Kevin Magnussen crashed heavily at Radion on lap 6, which moved Ocon back up to 11th and triggered the safety car. Ocon pitted at the end of lap 6 for medium tyres and came out 15th. The race was red flagged on lap 9 in order to repair structural damage to the crash barriers at Radion, and the drivers lined up in the pit lane. The race resumed 15 minutes later behind the safety car, which came in at the end of lap 10. Raikkonen passed Ocon at Lecumbe and Nasr passed him at Bruxelles, leaving Ocon last on track. Verstappen pitted on lap 16 and came out 12 seconds behind Ocon. He caught and passed Ocon at Lecumbe on lap 21. Kvyat pitted on lap 21 and came out 6 seconds behind Ocon. Jolyon Palmer and Gutierrez pitted on lap 2, which moved Ocon up to 14th. Romain Grosjean and Nasr pitted on lap 23, which moved Ocon up to 12th. Ocon pitted on lap 24 for a second set of medium tyres and came out just in front of Nasr, who had taken a 5-second time penalty. Ocon was lapped on lap 40 and finished his first race in 16th after keeping Nasr behind him for the entire second half of the race. At the Italian Grand Prix, Wehrlein advanced into Q2 for the second race in a row by going 14th fastest in Q1. An electrical fault caused Ocon's car to cut out completely on his hot lap and he didn't set a time. Wehrlein improved in Q2 to qualify 14th, with a grid penalty for Romain Grosjean moving him up to 13th. Ocon received a needless grid penalty as well for an unscheduled gearbox change. Wehrlein started the race on soft tyres and Ocon on mediums. Wehrlein had a fantastic start and passed Fernando Alonso, Max Verstappen and Esteban Gutierrez off the line. Alonso repassed him exiting out of Variante del Rettifilo. Ocon ran wide at Variante della Roggia and cut the chicane. He then passed Jenson Button at the first Lesmo, who was pushed onto the gravel. Verstappen repassed Wehrlein at the Ascari chicane. Grosjean passed Wehrlein at Variante del Rettifilo on lap 2. Jolyon Palmer and Felipe Nasr then collided there, which put both out of the race and moved Ocon up to 19th. Button then repassed him at Variante della Roggia. Valtteri Bottas, Verstappen, Alonso and Daniel Kvyat all pitted on lap 13, which moved Wehrlein up to 9th and Ocon to 19th. Nico Hülkenberg and Kevin Magnussen pitted on lap 14, which moved both of them up one more place. Button pitted on lap 15 and came up behind Ocon. Bottas passed Wehrlein on the start-finish straight on lap 16. Wehrlein pitted on lap 16 for medium tyres and came out 17th. Gutierrez pitted at the same time, which moved Ocon to 15th. Button passed Ocon at the Ascari chicane on lap 18. Wehrlein passed Ocon at Variante del Rettifilo on lap 20. Gutierrez passed Ocon at the Ascari chicane on lap 22. He then first got lapped on lap 23. Carlos Sainz and Marcus Ericsson pitted on lap 23, which moved Wehrlein and Ocon both up 2 places. Sainz passed Ocon at Variante del Rettifilo on lap 25. Kvyat and Ericsson both passed Ocon there on lap 26. Wehrlein pulled over and out of the race at Variante del Rettifilo with an oil leak on lap 26. Magnussen passed Ocon at the same place, which put him back in last. Magnussen pitted on lap 30, which moved Ocon up to 18th. Ocon pitted for soft tyres on lap 33 after the longest first stint in the race and came out 17 seconds behind Magnussen. Kvyat retired on lap 37, which moved Ocon up to 18th. He slowly closed in on Magnussen, but was lapped for a second time on lap 45 and finished in 18th and last. Next up was the lights of the Singapore Grand Prix. Wehrlein caused a red flag in FP3 after crashing on the narrow high downforce streets. This was a track that Manor had historically struggled at, and 2016 proved to be no exception. Wehrlein qualified 20th, 7/10 of a second behind Jolyon Palmer in 19th. Ocon was 6/10 of a second slower in 21st, ahead of only Sebastian Vettel, who had done only a slighter lap after incurring numerous grid penalties. A grid penalty for Romain Grosjean moved Wehrlein up to 19th. Both drivers started on ultra-soft tyres. Grosjean failed to start the race, which moved Ocon up to 20th. Nico Hülkenberg was sent into the pit wall as the cars pulled away. Wehrlein passed Palmer into turn 1 and Felipe Nasr at turn 3. Ocon passed Palmer and Nasr at turn 5 and the safety car was then brought out. All drivers were directed through the pit lane where Valtteri Bottas and Jenson Button stopped for repairs, moving Wehrlein and Ocon up to 14th and 15th. The race resumed at the end of lap 2. Nasr passed Ocon at turn 13 and Wehrlein there on lap 4. Vettel passed Ocon at turn 1 on lap 5 and passed Wehrlein there on lap 6. Carlos Sainz pitted on lap 7 and Nasr on lap 8, which moved both drivers up 2 places. On lap 12, Ocon was awarded a 5-second time penalty for overtaking under the safety car. Max Verstappen pitted on lap 13 and came out just behind Ocon. He quickly passed him at turn 7. Fernando Alonso pitted on lap 14 and came out just behind Wehrlein and also quickly passed him at turn 7. Verstappen then passed Wehrlein at turn 1 on lap 16. Sainz passed Ocon at turn 1 on lap 17. Felipe Massa pitted at the same time and came up behind Wehrlein and quickly passed him at turn 7. Nasr and Kevin Magnussen pitted on lap 17, which moved Wehrlein up to 12th. Wehrlein pitted for super soft tyres on lap 18 and came out 20th and last. Ocon pitted for a second set of ultra soft tyres on lap 19, served his time penalty and also had trouble fitting a wheel, which caused him to be stationary for a colossal 1 minute and 16 seconds. He came out lapped and a whole minute behind Wehrlein. Ericsson pitted on lap 25 and came out 18 seconds behind Wehrlein. Sainz and Button pitted on lap 27, which moved Wehrlein up to 16th. Sainz passed Wehrlein at turn 7 on lap 29. Bottas pitted on lap 30, which moved Wehrlein back up to 16th. Palmer pitted on lap 34, which moved Wehrlein up to 15th. Ocon pitted for a set of super soft tyres on the same lap. Bottas retired on lap 36, which moved Ocon up to 19th. Wehrlein made his second stop on lap 36 for a second set of ultra soft tyres and came out 17th and lapped. Ocon was lapped for a second time on lap 38. Button retired on lap 44, which moved Ocon to 19th. Ocon made his final stop for a second set of super soft tyres on lap 45, and a relatively quiet race ended with them sandwiching Marcus Ericsson. Next up was the Malaysian Grand Prix, held much later in the season than normal. Ocon outqualified Wehrlein for the first time by qualifying 19th, half a second off of Jolyon Palmer at 18th. Wehrlein was a 10th slower after getting traffic on his second run. Both drivers outqualified Fernando Alonso, who had numerous grid penalties and so did not set a representative time. Both drivers started on soft tyres. Felipe Massa stalled at the start of the formation lap and started from the pit lane. Ocon had a strong start and passed Marcus Ericsson, Felipe Nasr and Jolyon Palmer off the line. Wehrlein was passed by Alonso but in turn passed Nasr. Nico Rosberg was sent into a spin by Sebastian Vettel at turn 1 and they were passed by both drivers. Ocon managed to pass Kevin Magnussen, Carlos Sainz, Daniel Kvyat and Esteban Gutierrez at turn 1 as well. Wehrlein passed Gutierrez and Kvyat on the run to turn 4. The virtual safety car was then deployed with Ocon in 10th and Wehrlein 15th. The race resumed on lap 3. Sainz and Alonso passed Ocon at turn 15. Rosberg then passed Wehrlein at turn 1 on lap 4. Rosberg passed Ocon at turn 15 on lap 6. Wehrlein managed to pass Palmer at turn 1 on lap 7. Romain Grosjean crashed out on lap 8, which moved Ocon to 12th and Wehrlein to 14th and triggered a second virtual safety car. Wehrlein took the chance to pit for hard tyres along with several other drivers and came out 17th behind Kvyat. Ocon jumped up to 7th. The race resumed on lap 10. Ericsson passed Ocon at turn 1 on lap 11. Ocon pitted for hard tyres on lap 12 and came out behind Wehrlein in 17th. On lap 16, Ocon was given a 5-second time penalty for speeding in the pit lane. Both drivers stuck with Kvyat, but Massa slowly closed in on them. Kvyat pitted on lap 29, which moved them up to 15th and 16th. Wehrlein pitted for a second set of hard tyres on lap 30 and came out 18th and lapped. Ocon pitted for a second set of hard tyres along with Massa on lap 31, served his time penalty and came up behind Gutierrez in 19th and last. Massa passed Wehrlein at turn 1 on lap 34. On lap 37, Ocon was given another 5-second time penalty for speeding in the pit lane again. Race leader Lewis Hamilton retired on lap 40, which moved both drivers up a place and triggered another virtual safety car. Gutierrez pitted and came up behind Ocon, but then retired as well with a loose wheel, which left them as the final two on track. Wehrlein pitted for a second set of soft tyres on lap 41 and came up behind Ocon. The race resumed shortly thereafter. Wehrlein attempted to pass on Ocon at turn 1 on lap 46, but then did pass him at turn 6. Nasser then retired, which moved them up to 15th and 16th, and that was where they finished the race. Next up was the Japanese Grand Prix. Ocon outqualified Wehrlein for the second race in a row in 21st, only 0.02 of a second behind Felipe Nasr in 20th. Wehrlein was 0.2 slower and had a needless 5-place grid penalty for an unscheduled gearbox change, but both drivers moved up a place as Jenson Button had a grid penalty as well. Both drivers started on soft tyres. Ocon passed Nasr off the line and then passed Kevin Magnussen at turn 2, though Magnussen repassed him at the Dunlop curve and Nasr repassed him at turn 9. The two drivers ran in formation through the first stint. Fernando Alonso pitted on lap 9 and Daniel Kvyat and Romain Grosjean on lap 10, which gave both drivers 3 places. Grosjean quickly passed Wehrlein at the hairpin on lap 11. Ocon pitted on lap 12 for hard tyres and came out 22nd. Button then passed Wehrlein at turn 1. Wehrlein pitted for hard tyres as well on lap 13 and came out 7 seconds behind Ocon. Button pitted on lap 19 and came out 5 seconds behind Ocon and 8 seconds in front of Wehrlein, who was rapidly dropping back. Button caught and passed Ocon at the hairpin on lap 23. Kvyat then pitted and came out 10 seconds behind Ocon. Magnussen and Marcus Ericsson pitted on lap 25 and came out behind Kvyat. Nasr also pitted and came out behind Wehrlein. Wehrlein was first lapped on lap 26. Ericsson pitted on lap 26 and came out behind Magnussen. He then passed Wehrlein at the hairpin. Alonso pitted on lap 27 and came out in front of Magnussen. Esteban Gutierrez pitted on lap 28 and came out in front of Wehrlein, moving Ocon up to 15th. Kvyat then passed Ocon at the hairpin on lap 29. Ocon pitted for a second set of hard tyres on lap 31 and came out behind Wehrlein. Wehrlein then pitted for a second set of hard tyres as well on lap 32 and came back out in last, 14 seconds behind Ocon. Ocon slowly closed in on Gutierrez in 20th, but ran out of time and finished 2 seconds behind, with Wehrlein another 19 seconds behind in a rare race with no retirements. Formula 1 then travelled across the Pacific Ocean for the United States Grand Prix. Jordan King made his Grand Prix weekend debut by stepping in for Wehrlein in FP1. Wehrlein then lost time in FP3 by spinning off into the gravel. He managed to qualify in 20th, 0.04 of a second ahead of Felipe Nasr in 21st, with Ocon a quarter of a second behind in 22nd. Wehrlein started on soft tyres and Ocon on mediums. Nasr passed Wehrlein at turn 1 and Nico Hülkenberg was passed by both drivers after taking damage. Wehrlein was pushed wide at turn 2 and passed by Ocon. Ocon then passed Nasr and Kevin Magnussen at turn 4. Valtteri Bottas then received a puncture and was passed by both drivers. Sergio Perez was sent into a spin at turn 11 by Daniel Kvyat and was passed by Ocon, who also tried to pass Romain Grosjean. Magnussen repassed Ocon at turn 12. Perez then passed Ocon at turn 20, leaving Ocon 18th and Wehrlein 20th at the end of lap 1. Wehrlein passed Nasr at turn 1 on lap 2. He then tried to pass Ocon at turn 12 on lap 3 and pushed Ocon wide, but Ocon got back past him at turn 13. Wehrlein then successfully passed Ocon at turn 12 on lap 4. Nasr then passed Ocon at turn 12 on lap 8. Jenson Button, Perez and Grosjean all pitted on lap 10 and came up behind Wehrlein. Button passed Wehrlein at turn 1 on lap 12. Perez then passed Wehrlein at turn 11 and Grosjean passed him at turn 12. Wehrlein pitted for medium tyres on lap 13 along with Gutierrez and Magnussen and came out in 20th, moving Ocon up to 17th. Gutierrez passed Ocon at turn 12 on lap 14 and Magnussen passed him at turn 12 on lap 15. Jolly and Palmer pitted on lap 15 and came up behind Ocon. Gutierrez retired on lap 16, which gave both drivers a place. Ocon pitted for soft tyres on lap 17 and came out 20th and last. Bottas pitted on lap 20 and came up behind Ocon. Kvyat pitted on lap 21 and came up behind Wehrlein. Ocon was then first lapped on lap 22. Palmer pitted on lap 26, which moved Wehrlein up a place. Ocon then pitted for a second set of soft tyres and came out 20 seconds behind Bottas. Magnussen pitted on lap 27, which gave another place to Wehrlein. Wehrlein was first lapped on lap 28. Max Verstappen retired on lap 28, which gave both drivers a place. Nasser pitted on lap 29, which moved Wehrlein up to 13th. Kvyat passed Wehrlein at turn 12 on lap 30. Verstappen's retirement triggered a virtual safety car, so Wehrlein pitted for a second set of medium tyres and came up behind Palmer in 16th. The race resumed on lap 33. Nasser passed Wehrlein at turn 12. Kimi Raikkonen retired on lap 39, which gave both drivers a place. Bottas finally passed Wehrlein at turn 12 on lap 41, leaving just Ocon 34 seconds behind Wehrlein. Ocon made his third and final stop for a set of super soft tyres on lap 44 and was lapped for a second time, and the two drivers finished in 17th and 18th. There was a resurgence in form for the Mexican Grand Prix as Wehrlein made it into Q2 for the first time since the Italian Grand Prix by qualifying 16th. Ocon was half a second slower and qualified 20th to beat Romain Grosjean and Jolyon Palmer, who failed to set a time. Both drivers started on soft tyres. They both had good starts as Wehrlein passed Marcus Ericsson and Ocon passed Daniel Kvyat on the long run to turn 1. Ocon was then passed by Palmer and Kvyat at turn 1. Wehrlein was clipped by Esteban Gutierrez at turn 3, then collided with Ericsson, which took his wheel off and put him out of the race. Ocon managed to repass Palmer and Kvyat at turn 3 while they were dodging Wehrlein, but Palmer repassed Ocon at turn 4 and the virtual safety car was then triggered, which quickly became a full safety car. Daniel Ricciardo, Palmer and Ericsson all pitted at the end of lap 1, which moved Ocon up to 16th. The race resumed at the end of lap 3. Ricciardo quickly passed Ocon at turn 1 and Kvyat passed him at turn 13. Carlos Sainz, Kevin Magnussen and Gutierrez pitted on lap 12, which moved Ocon up to 15th. Kvyat then pitted on lap 13, which moved Ocon up to 14th. Ocon pitted for medium tyres on lap 14 and came out 21st and last, just behind Grosjean after being undercut by all drivers behind. Ocon was first lapped on lap 29. Gutierrez pitted on lap 48 and came out just behind Ocon. He attempted to pass Ocon at turn 1 on lap 50, but Ocon came back up the inside and Gutierrez clipped his left rear tyre and lost a front wing end plate. He then passed Ocon at turn 6. Grosjean then pitted on lap 50 and came up 5 seconds behind Ocon. He then passed him at turn 1 on lap 53. Ocon was lapped for a second time on lap 60 and finished the race in 21st. At the Brazilian Grand Prix, Ocon announced that for 2017 he would be driving for another Mercedes customer team, Force India. Both drivers got themselves ahead of their main rival Sauber in qualifying, with Wehrlein 19th and Ocon 20th, only 5 thousandths of a second apart, though Ocon was given a 3-place grid penalty for impeding Jolyon Palmer during Q1 and so started 22nd. There was torrential rain on race day. Romain Grosjean crashed on the way to the grid, which moved both drivers up a place, and the decision was made to start the race behind the safety car with everyone on full wet tyres. The safety car came in at the end of lap 7. Kevin Magnussen immediately pitted for intermediates, which moved both drivers up a place. Wehrlein was passed by Nasser at the Senna S and then Ericsson at Descido do Largo. Esteban Gutierrez ran wide at Junção on lap 8 and was passed by both drivers. Ocon passed Wehrlein there and Jenson Button then pitted for intermediates, which moved Ocon and Wehrlein up to 17th and 18th. Fernando Alonso, Valtteri Bottas, Felipe Massa, Daniel Kvyat, Jolyon Palmer and Ericsson all pitted for intermediates on lap 9, which moved Ocon and Wehrlein up to 11th and 12th. Gutierrez then passed Wehrlein at the Senna S. Sebastian Vettel then pitted for intermediates on lap 10, which moved them up to 10th and 12th. Gutierrez pitted for intermediates on lap 12, which gave Wehrlein 11th, who was already 6 seconds behind Ocon. Ericsson crashed on the start-finish straight at the same time and the safety car was brought out again. The safety car came back in at the end of lap 19. However, Kimi Raikkonen immediately crashed on the start-finish straight and came within a hair's breadth of being collected by Ocon, so the safety car came straight out again for a third time, but this quickly became a red flag, so the cars lined up in the pit lane with Ocon and Wehrlein in 9th and 10th. The race resumed behind the safety car 35 minutes later with everyone on a new set of full wet tyres. Nico Hülkenberg pitted on lap 23, which moved both drivers up a place. The race was red flagged again on lap 23 due to the deteriorating conditions. The race resumed behind the safety car again 23 minutes later. The safety car came in at the end of lap 31. Wehrlein was passed by Alonso at the CNRS. Vettel then passed Wehrlein there on lap 34. Alonso passed Ocon at Juncker on lap 35. Bottas passed Wehrlein at the CNRS on lap 36 and Hülkenberg then quickly passed him at Decido do Lago. Vettel passed Ocon at Curva do Sol on lap 37. Magnussen then passed Wehrlein at the CNRS on lap 38. Bottas pitted at the end of the lap, which moved Wehrlein back up to 13th, but at the same time he was passed by Gutierrez. Daniel Ricciardo pitted on lap 40, which moved Ocon to 9th. Kvyat then passed Wehrlein at Bico to Pato on lap 41. Magnussen pitted at the end of that lap, which moved Wehrlein back up to 14th. Hülkenberg passed Ocon at the CNRS on lap 43. Ocon tried to come back at him at Curva do Sol but was pushed off the track. Massa passed Wehrlein there as well. Bottas then passed Wehrlein at Decido do Lago on lap 44. Ricciardo passed Ocon at Juncker on lap 44 and both drivers were now out of the points. There was cause for concern as well as Nasser of main rival Sauber was up in 7th. Gutierrez pitted on lap 47 which moved Wehrlein up to 15th. Massa crashed out on the start-finish straight just after, which gave Wehrlein 14th and brought out the safety car for the 6th time. Ricciardo pitted on lap 52 which moved Ocon back into the points. Wehrlein pitted as well for new wet tyres but did not lose any positions. Verstappen pitted for wet tyres on lap 54 which moved Ocon to 9th and Wehrlein to 13th. The safety car came in at the end of lap 55 for a 16-lap sprint to the finish, over 2.5 hours after the race started. Alonso immediately span on the start-finish straight, which gave both drivers a place. Verstappen passed Wehrlein at the CNRS on lap 57. Alonso passed Wehrlein at the CNRS on lap 60. Hülkenberg took 6th from Nasser at Curva do Sol at the same time, which left Nasser in Ocon's sights, who he was slowly closing in on. However, a charging Verstappen passed Ocon at Mugello on lap 61. Verstappen then passed Nasser at Decido do Lago on lap 62, leaving him in front of Ocon again. Ricciardo then passed Ocon at the CNRS on lap 63, and then passed Nasser at the same place a lap later. Magnussen then passed Wehrlein at the same place. Alonso passed Ocon at Juncker on lap 70, which pushed him out of the points. Bottas then passed Ocon at Bico to Pato on the final lap. A disappointing and costly race ended with Ocon 12th and Wehrlein 15th. Nasser finished 9th, which meant Sauber pushed Manor back to 11th and last in the Constructors' Championship. The longest season in Formula 1 history up to that point came to an end at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Jordan King got a final go in the car in FP1 in place of Ocon. Wehrlein made it into Q2 for the 5th time that year to qualify 16th. Ocon was half a second slower and qualified 20th ahead of Carlos Sainz and Marcus Ericsson. Wehrlein started on ultra soft tyres and Ocon on softs. Ocon got around a slow starting Kevin Magnussen off the line. Max Verstappen was sent into a spin at turn 1 and passed by both drivers. Wehrlein was then passed by Daniel Kvyat and Felipe Nasr at turn 2. Wehrlein was then pushed wide at turn 3 by Ocon and was passed by him and Sainz, and then by Magnussen at turn 6. Ericsson passed Wehrlein at turn 8. Wehrlein repassed Magnussen at turn 9 but was in turn passed by Verstappen. At the end of lap 1, Ocon was up to 17th and Wehrlein was down to 21st. Verstappen passed Ocon at turn 8 on lap 2 and Wehrlein passed Ericsson there as well. Wehrlein first pitted on lap 6 for soft tyres but had a 12-second stop and came out 21st after Magnussen had retired. Felipe Massa then retired on lap 7, which moved both drivers up a place. Fernando Alonso, Jolyon Palmer and Felipe Nasr all pitted on lap 7, and then Kvyat, Esteban Gutierrez and Felipe Massa on lap 8, which moved Ocon up to 11th. Massa passed Ocon at turn 8 on lap 12. Jenson Button then retired, which gave a place to him and Wehrlein. Alonso then passed Ocon at turn 8 on lap 13. Kvyat retired on lap 14, which moved Wehrlein to 18th. Romain Grosjean pitted on lap 20, which moved Ocon to 11th, and Palmer pitted on lap 21, which moved Wehrlein to 17th. Ocon pitted for a second set of soft tyres on lap 22 and came out 10 seconds behind Wehrlein and 4 seconds in front of Palmer. Wehrlein did his second stop on lap 24 for a second set of softs and came out 12 seconds behind Palmer. Sainz pitted on lap 28 and came out just in front of Wehrlein. They both closed in on Ocon and Palmer, who were being held up by Nasr. Ocon eventually passed Nasr at turn 11 on lap 36, but in doing so hit Nasr, which broke off part of his front wing, which was then hit by Palmer. Ocon pitted for super soft tyres along with Nasr and both came out lapped. Ericsson pitted from right in front of Wehrlein on lap 38 and came up behind Ocon. Wehrlein then started getting lapped. Sainz and Palmer collided at turn 17 on lap 41, which allowed Wehrlein to pass both of them and put Sainz out of the race. Palmer then pitted, which gave 2 places to Ocon as well. Ocon closed in on Wehrlein on fresher tyres and passed him at turn 11 on lap 49, despite both of them going on to the runoff and cutting the chicane. A strong final race ended with Ocon 13th and Wehrlein 14th, beating Ericsson, Nasr and Palmer. 2016 had been by far Manor's strongest season since entering the sport in 2010. They had recovered from a difficult 2015 and built a competitive car that for the first time enabled them to compete with the established teams on pure pace, where once they had seen them disappear into the distance, leaving them to battle with Caterham and HRT. A heroic drive by Wehrlein at Austria put them ahead of Sauber. However, development stagnated in the second half of the season, and they started drifting back to the rear end of the grid, and eventually lost the crucial 10th in the Constructors' Championship at the penultimate round of the season, costing them £10 million in prize money. Pascal Wehrlein was the strongest rookie driver the team had had since Jules Bianchi. He came into the sport with a strong pedigree as the reigning DTM champion, and spent the whole year being competitive and battling with other teams. He won the qualifying battle against Haryanto 7-4 and the race battle 8-0. He also won the qualifying battle against Ocon 6-2 and tied the race battle 3-all. 5 times he advanced into Q2 and also scored the team's 3rd ever point. He did, however, crash out of 3 races and broke down in 2 others. His sole point at Austria put him 19th in the Drivers' Championship, ahead of one-time substitute Stoffel van Dorn and full-time drivers Marcus Ericsson and Esteban Gutierrez. Esteban Ocon was thrown in the deep end by joining the team mid-season, but once he acclimatised he proved more than a match for Wehrlein. He tended to be weaker in qualifying, which he lost 2-6, but was much closer on pace during the races, where he tied with Wehrlein 3-all. He bumped wheels a few times of other drivers, but managed to finish every race and continued this streak for another 18 races in 2017. He finished 23rd in the Drivers' Championship with a best result of 12th at the Brazilian Grand Prix. Rio Haryanto was yet another example of a pay driver with less than exemplary feeder series results but generous sponsorship. He was fairly evenly matched with Wehrlein in qualifying, which he lost 7-4, but was often fairly marginal, but was completely outclassed in the races and failed to beat Wehrlein once. Only once did he beat any other driver in a race, and almost every weekend he either span or had an accident, which led to him losing his backing mid-season. He finished 24th and last in the Drivers' Championship with a best result of 15th at the Monaco Grand Prix. After the season's end, Manor began their preparations for the 2017 season, including having a full mock-up of their new car for wind tunnel testing. However, the loss of prize money hit their finances hard, and on January 6, the team's parent company Just Racing Services were placed into administration by the administrators FRP Advisory LLP. They tried to find a buyer, but lost Pascal Wehrlein as he signed for Sauber on January 16th. On January 27th, Just Racing Services collapsed after failing to find a buyer, and the team folded for good. A few months later, all assets were put up for auction, including all cars that hadn't been sold at the previous auction in late 2014, and the factory closed down and was eventually bought by motorsports technology group ProDrive. One of the 2014 and 2015 chassis that had been stripped of its power unit and gearbox and painted in the team's 2016 livery to be used as a show car sold for a mere £50,000. One of the 2011 cars sold at the 2014 auction has found a new lease of life as a track day car owned by TDF, but the others were either stripped or sold to private buyers. As Virgin, the team had entered 38 races and suffered 22 retirements, 18 from reliability and 4 from accidents. Their highest ever grid start was Glock's 16th place finish at the 2010 Malaysia Grand Prix, and their best ever result was 14th place finishes set by Lucas de Grassi at the 2010 Malaysia Grand Prix, Timo Glock at the 2010 Belgian Grand Prix, and Jerome D'Ambrosio at the 2011 Australian and Canadian Grand Prix. They gained notoriety early on as their first car's fuel tank was not large enough to finish races initially, and they finished behind HRT in the Constructors' Championship both years despite having a faster car. As Marussia, they entered 74 races, had both cars fail to start one of them, and suffered 17 retirements, 11 from reliability and 6 from accidents. Their highest ever grid start was Jules Bianchi's 12th place start at the 2014 British Grand Prix, and their best ever result was Bianchi's 9th place finish at the 2014 Monaco Grand Prix. They improved enough as Marussia to outpace Caterham and become the only one of the 3 new teams to score points. However, Bianchi's fatal accident at Suzuka in 2014 almost destroyed the team, and they had essentially gone back to square one for a hopelessly uncompetitive 2015. As Manor, they entered 21 races and had 8 retirements, 3 from reliability and 5 from accidents. They broke their highest grid start record again with Pascal Wehrlein's 11th place start at the 2016 Austrian Grand Prix, where they went on to score their sole point. Despite finishing last, their final season was by far their strongest, and they had achieved the target set out 6 years earlier of scoring points and competing with the faster teams. However, money, which was always in short supply, eventually ran out. The entry fee for the 2017 season was returned to them by the FIA at the end of the year as they had not participated, but that was not nearly enough to resurrect the team, and Manor Racing MRT was no more. After 7 seasons and 134 races, the 3 new teams had finally disappeared from the Formula 1 grid. They faced a seemingly insurmountable challenge entering the sport as startups with tiny budgets compared to the veteran teams, but they faced up to that challenge with determination and professionalism. The 15 cars that they raced with were not the groundbreaking pieces of engineering produced by the likes of Red Bull and Mercedes, but they include some of the most aesthetically pleasing cars to grace the Formula 1 grid. 24 drivers raced for the 3 teams, and another 11 served in testing, reserve and development roles. They included a mixture of older veterans bringing experience, young rookies bringing speed and talent, and pay drivers bringing much needed cash. After racing for them, most drivers moved on to other racing series. Some retired from racing altogether, and tragically, 2 are no longer with us. There are, however, 2 drivers very much active on the Formula 1 grid to this day who started their careers with the new teams: Daniel Ricciardo and Esteban Ocon. That brings this series to a close. I hope you've enjoyed watching it as much as I've enjoyed making it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at Brook_F1, and I'll see you all next time.